Good day, everyone, and welcome you all to the webinar on state government finances. Ms. Aditi Nair, VP and Chief Economist, along with her team, Ms. Nitika Sridhar and Ms. Jasprit from ICRA, will take you through the presentation. The presentation will be followed by a Q&A session with the participants. Over to you, Aditi.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aditi Nair and I'm ICRA's Chief Economist. On behalf of ICRA, I welcome you all to today's webinar on state government finances. I have with me my colleague, Ms. Nitika Sridhar, who's an Assistant Vice President in our State Finances team. We're also joined by our guest speaker, Mr. Shrikant Chatterjee, Deputy Head Debt Capital Markets, ICICI Bank Limited. So what we've done is that we have analyzed the FY22 budgets of 12 state governments in detail. These states are Andhra Pradesh, Gujarat, Haryana, Karnataka, Kerala, Maharashtra, Punjab, Rajasthan, Tamil Nadu, Telangana, Uttar Pradesh, and West Bengal. And they account for 3/4 of India's GDP. The state's FY22 budget documents included their budget estimates or BE for FY22, their revised estimates or RE for FY21, and the actuals for FY2020. For FY21, we have also studied the provisional actuals which have been published by the CAG. Now, most of these states had prepared and presented their FY22 budget estimates before the second wave of COVID-19. As a result, the actual fiscal trends for FY22 could vary from the state's estimates. However, as economic activity normalizes, there is an expectation that fiscal trends will improve vis-a-vis FY21. In today's webinar, we're going to discuss our projections of the revenues, expenditure, deficit, and leverage levels of these 12 states for FY22, and specifically look at how the projections compare with the pre-COVID level, which is FY2020. Subsequently, we're going to discuss our estimates for the size of SDL issuance, spreads, and liquidity. Before I ask Nitika to kick off today's presentation, we have the first poll of the day for our audience. Please pull up the first poll. I request you all to take the next minute to respond to this question, which is, what is your expectation of the aggregate fiscal deficit to GSDP ratio for the state governments for FY22? Do you expect it to be less than 3.5% of GSDP, between 3.5% to 4% of GSDP, or more than 4% of GSDP? Okay, so we have the result of the first poll, and half if you think that the state's fiscal deficit is going to be more than 4% of GSDP in FY22. Just 14% of you think it's going to be less than 3.5% of GSDP, and 36% of you think it's going to be between 3.5% to 4% of GSDP. Now, on that note, I'm going to ask Nitika to take us through the first part of the presentation. Over to you, Nitika.
Thanks, Aditi, and good evening, everyone. So we all know that FY21 was an unusual year for government finances, not just in India, but across the world due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So if we look at the first chart on slide 5, we can see that the revenue receipts of the 12 states as per the provisional actuals of FY21 were 17.5 trillion. That's about 5 trillion lower than what the states had initially budgeted for FY21. The revenue expenditure was 11% or 2.5 trillion lower than the budgeted level, and capital expenditure was about 1 trillion lower than the budgeted levels. In the exhibit on the right, we can see that the combined revenue deficit of the 12 states turned out to be as large as 3.3 trillion, as opposed to about 820 billion that they had included in FY21 budget estimates. So the fiscal deficit also widened to 6.3 trillion in FY21 provisional actuals from the budgeted 4.7 trillion. Now, if you look at the YOY changes in FY21, the revenue receipts were around 5% lower from FY20, and the revenue expenditure and capital expenditure, they increased by roughly 6% and 11% respectively. Now, the key takeaway from this slide is the deterioration in the revenue deficit and fiscal deficit in FY21 from the pre-COVID levels. Now, this was as far as FY21 was concerned. What is it that states have budgeted in FY22? Now, in FY22 BE, the aggregate revenue receipts of the 12 states, they were expected to expand by a robust 33% on a YOY basis and revenue expenditure by 21%. So accordingly, in FY22 BE, the combined revenue deficit was forecast to halve 1.8 trillion from 3.3 trillion that we'd seen in FY21 provisional estimates. The capital expenditure was expected to increase very sharply by 59% in FY22 BE. And because of this, so there's an improvement that they had budgeted in the revenue deficit and a very sharp increase in capital expenditure. All in all, put together, the fiscal deficit was budgeted to remain nearly unchanged at 6.28 trillion in FY22 BE from 6.27 in the previous year. Now, let's just discuss the major component of the revenues. Now, states' own tax revenues, or SOTR as it is commonly called, so that is roughly about 50% of the revenue receipts of the states. So that include taxes like state GST, sales tax or VAT on petroleum products, excise duty on liquor, stamps and registration collections, etc. Now, the FY21 provisional estimates indicate that SGST, sales tax, stamps and registrations, they contracted by less than 5% on a YOY basis, while motor vehicle tax, that was the worst affected with 17% contraction, as you can see on the first chart on slide 8. Interestingly, excise duty collections that's levied on liquor, that expanded by about 11% in FY21. So this benefited from the increase in excise duty on liquor by 11 out of 12 states. And on an overall basis, if we see, the SOTR declined by 5% in FY21 to 9.2 trillion. Now, in the budget estimates for FY22, states have indicated a healthy 38.5% YOY growth in SOTR. However, based on our analysis of various indicators, including the trends in GST e-way bills, Google's mobility index, consumption of petrol and diesel, as well as their retail prices, automobile sales, sales of residential units in key geographies, electricity consumption, etc., we have projected a combined SOTR of the 12 states to expand by a lower 26.1% in FY22. So while we project that the aggregate SOTR in FY22 would be lower than the budgeted number, it is expected to be 20% higher than the pre-pandemic level. And even on a YOY basis, it's a decent growth of 26%. So this was about the own tax revenues of the states. If you talk about the own non-tax revenues of the states, that's a relatively low contributor to the overall state revenues. In FY21, this particular component, the non-tax revenues of the states, so that was 44% lower than what the states had initially indicated. So it was 980 billion versus 1.8 trillion that the states had indicated. So for this year, the combined SONTR is expected to increase very, very sharply by 57% to 1.5 trillion. Here we like to point out one thing, that if we see the recent trends, we have noticed very sharp downward revisions in the actual non-tax revenue receipts compared to the amount that the states include in their budgets. So accordingly, we have scaled down the budgeted SONTR by about 10 to 25% for some of the states in our sample. And accordingly, we have estimated that the combined SONTR would be close to 1.4 trillion, which is a YOY growth of 39%, much lower than 57% that they have indicated in the budgets. So these two components were the own revenues of the state governments. If we look at the two components which comes from the government of India, first is the devolution of taxes to the states. Now, after excluding all the non-shareable cesses, surcharges from the gross tax revenues, the government of India transfers a portion of the taxes to the state government. But this transfer is based on the recommendations of the successive finance commission. So for FY22, the government of India has budgeted gross tax revenues at 22.1 trillion and tax devolution for all states at 6.7 trillion. So this is as per the union budget, which was presented on 1st of February 2021. So now we have data for the first 5 months of the current fiscal, which is for the period April to August. So the gross tax revenues, they have grown at a very sharp 70.5%, despite the concerns related to the impact of the second wave of COVID-19 on economic activity. We have studied these tax revenues in quite a bit of details, and we expect that the gross tax revenues in FY22 to exceed the budget estimates by rupees 2 trillion. And the tax devolution to states will be up by about 600 billion. So there is an upside from this component. So by applying the interstate share of the 12 states to this revised tax devolution estimate for FY22, we project that the combined tax devolution will be at 4.4 trillion instead of 4 trillion that the states had included in the budget estimates. Now, the second component of central transfers is the grants from the center, and a big component of which is the GST compensation. For all the states put together, we estimate that the compensation requirement will be at about 2.7 trillion. Now, this compensation requirement is nothing but the difference between the protected revenues and the SGST collections. And for our 12 states, we think that the requirement will be 1.9 trillion. Now, what is the most contentious issue around GST compensation? It is the funding of this compensation. Now, if you recall that as per the GST Compensation Act, this compensation is supposed to be funded by a cess, which is levied on specified items, predominantly on automobiles. Now, for FY22, the Government of India has projected cess collections at 1.1 trillion in the Union Budget FY22. So we have data for H1 FY22, and the cess collections stand at about 508 billion. So we think that for the full year, 1.1 is a reasonable estimate. So we think it's the Government of India will be able to collect that kind of cess collections. But this would not be enough for funding the entire GST compensation requirement for FY22. So the Government of India would be providing 1.6 trillion as back-to-back GST compensation loan to the states. So up until now, already Government of India has released 2 tranches, one in July, one in October. So out of 1.6, 1.2 trillion has already been released to the states. The share of our 12 states in this 1.2 is 700 billion. So we have shown, taking into account the balance component also. So we have tried to show the GST compensation and the grants on slide 12. So the cess that will form the, which is the grants for the states, that will form the revenues, and the back-to-back loan that will be a source of funding the deficit for the state governments. Next, we move on to slide 13. Here we would like to highlight a key risk factor. Now, the GST compensation is currently intended to be provided only till June 2022, which is Q1 of FY23 next year, first quarter of next fiscal. Now, if the GST compensation, it is not continued beyond this stipulated timeline of June 2022, it will pose a challenge to the states which have a relatively higher dependence on the GST compensation, like we have shown in this chart. Punjab, Karnataka, Gujarat, among these 12 states at least, they are getting a relatively higher proportion of their revenue receipts in the form of GST compensation. So if it's not continued right now, there is lack of clarity. We don't know. If it is not continued, it could be a source of risk for some of the states. Now, besides the GST compensation grants, the states also gets Finance Commission recommended grants and grants for centrally sponsored scheme. Now, the 15th Finance Commission recommended revenue deficit grants, local body grants, disaster management grants, and health grants to the states for FY22. So all these 4 components, they add up to about 2.2 trillion. Which have been included by the Government of India in the FY22 Union Budget. So because the Government of India is included in the Union Budget, so it's kind of an acceptance of the these components of the revenue grants, and we do expect the Government of India to release these grants to the states in the current fiscal. Overall, we estimate that the total grants to the states will be at 4.1 trillion, which is 20% lower than 5.1 trillion in FY22 BE. And you can see on the chart on slide 13 that the estimated grants would be about 8% higher on a YOY basis and 35% higher on the pre-COVID level grants, which was 3.1 trillion in FY20. So these were the four main components of revenues of the states. With this, we come to the end of our projections for revenue receipts for FY22. Just to summarize, we project revenue receipts of the 12 states at 21.5 trillion. That's about 8% lower than 23.4 trillion that the states had included in their budgets. And this also means that it's a YOY growth of 22% and 16% growth from pre-COVID levels. From revenue receipts, we now move on to the discussion on expenditure. So as far as the revenue expenditure is concerned, out of these 12 states, Kerala, Punjab, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, so they have announced pay revision in FY22, while several other states, they have announced a hike in dearness allowance for the state government employees and pensioners. So because of this, the combined expenditure on salaries and pensions, that's expected to increase by about 18 to 19% in FY22. Overall, we project the combined revenue expenditure of the 12 states at 23.9 trillion. So it's a modest cut of 5% from the budgeted level. On a YOY basis, it will be 14.4% higher. And from pre-COVID level, it will be about 22% higher. So from revenue receipts and revenue expenditure, from our projections, we can see that the combined revenue deficit of the 12 states that we forecast at 2.4 trillion. Now, this is higher than 1.8 trillion that the states had budgeted. So except for West Bengal, Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Haryana, the revenue deficit of the remaining 8 states is projected to be higher than the budget estimates, as you can see on the second chart on slide 16. So it's going to be higher than the budget estimates for FY22 at 2.4 trillion. With this, I hand it back to Aditi for the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Nitika. Now I'm going to move on to how the total fiscal deficits are going to be funded and use that to back calculate how much space we believe is available for capital spending in FY22. So for funding the fiscal deficits for FY22, the state governments can borrow unconditionally to the extent of 3.5% of their GSDP. We've used our estimate of the GSDP for FY22, and based on this, we forecast their total unconditional net borrowing limit for our sample, which is 12 states, at 6.5 trillion, as you can see on the bottom of the pyramid on this slide. Moving up, the back-to-back GST compensation loan from the GOI to the states that Nitika was talking about earlier, this will also be available for funding the fiscal deficits in FY22. This component is estimated at 1.1 trillion for the 12 states. Additionally, the borrowings carried forward from FY21 can be utilized for funding the fiscal deficits of FY22. And this is estimated at 2.3 trillion for our 12 states. We also expect some states to undertake power sector reforms, which will entitle them to additional borrowings. This is a relatively smaller component. And also the Government of India has set some quarterly targets for the completion of capital expenditure. If the states fulfill these targets, they'll be eligible for some additional borrowings over and above the base borrowing. So in aggregate, with all of these resources put together, we are estimating the total amount available to the 12 states for funding their FY22 fiscal deficits at a fairly large rupees 10.2 trillion. On the next slide, we look at the borrowing space for the 12 states individually. So each state's individual resource envelope, as we calculated on the previous slide, is going to be enough to cover their revenue deficit. But what we've done here is we've split up the 12 states into 3 groupings. The first group is Karnataka, Gujarat, Kerala, and Haryana, which are grouped on the left. For these states, the resource envelope will be enough to cover the projected revenue deficit as well as the budgeted capex. And we expect them to actually be able to complete the capex in line with the budget estimate. The second set of states in the middle are Maharashtra, Punjab, West Bengal, and UP. For these states as well, the estimated borrowing space would be adequate for meeting the projected revenue deficit as well as the budgeted capex. However, based on their actual spending on capital expenditure in the last 2 years, we think that the YOY growth embedded in their FY22 budget estimates appears to be quite high. Therefore, we have assumed that their capital expenditure in FY22 will be lower than their budget estimate, even though fiscal space is not a constraint. It's more an absorptive capacity issue, which makes us believe that the budgeted capex will not be completed. The third set on the right includes Tamil Nadu, Rajasthan, Telangana, and Andhra Pradesh. After meeting their projected revenue deficit for FY22, the balance resources will not be adequate for meeting the entire capex and net lending that these states have budgeted for FY22. So we've added the borrowings equivalent to 0.5% of their GSDP, assuming that they'll all complete the power sector reforms as recommended by the 15th Finance Commission. After this, TN appears to have enough resources to incur its budgeted capex. AP and Rajasthan can also utilize the borrowings, additional borrowings for capex that was sanctioned recently by the Government of India. However, we still believe that AP, Rajasthan, and Telangana may need to curtail their capital expenditure by 10 to 30% below their FY22 DE. Overall, we estimate the combined capital expenditure of the 12 states at rupees 3.8 trillion. Now, this is around 19% lower than the budgeted level of 4.7 trillion. However, it's a pretty healthy 28% higher than the provisional actuals for FY21 and a robust 43% larger than the pre-COVID level of 2.7 trillion in FY2020. So on the next slide, we have our projections for the combined fiscal deficit of the 12 states. And we believe that together, the sample's fiscal deficit is going to be 6.22 trillion in FY22. This is as high as the budgeted level of 6.28 trillion, as well as the FY21 provisional actuals of 6.27 trillion. However, the fiscal deficit is expected to narrow to 3.4% of GSDP. I might add our estimate of GSDP in FY22 from 3.9% of GSDP in the provisional actuals for FY21. So our projection is actually quite different from what we saw in the first poll, where half of our audience believes that the fiscal deficit is going to be more than 4% of GSDP in FY22 for the state governments. Also, with the estimated decline in the revenue deficit and higher capital spending, the quality of the fiscal deficit is set to improve in FY22 relative to FY21, although of course it's not going to be as good as it was in FY2020. Now on the next slide, we have the state-wise trends. The projected fiscal deficit of UP, Telangana, Haryana and Tamil Nadu in FY22 is expected to be higher than last year. And you can see these states on the right. But the remaining 8 states are expected to show an improvement in absolute terms between these 2 years. With this, we come to the end of the first part of our presentation, and I'm now going to ask our audience to respond to our second poll question. Please pull that up on the screen. The question is, are you seeing a pickup in capital spending at the state level? The options are no, limited to a few states, limited to some states, or widespread. We're asking FY22 vis-a-vis FY21. In fact, just a couple of days back, the RBI governor had remarked that fiscally prudent states must step up their capex and their quality of expenditure to create a better multiplier effect on the economy. We just wait. Okay, we have the result of the second poll. This is quite split. We have 42% of the audience saying that the capex pickup is limited to some states. This is followed by 36% saying it's limited to a few states. Only 18% think it's widespread, but I think encouragingly only 3% of you are not seeing any pickup in capex at the state level. Now, in the next couple of slides, we have our projections for the leverage indicators of our sample. So on the next slide, we have the combined debt stock of the 12 states. And this we are expecting will rise to 26.5% of GSDP at the end of FY22 from 22.9% of GSDP in FY20, which is pre-COVID. Guarantees are estimated to increase modestly to 4.1% of GSDP in FY22 from 3.5% of GSDP in FY20. But I must add here that the state-wise trends are extremely varied, and we do have large increases in guarantees from some states in our sample. Overall, the combined leverage, which is debt plus guarantees, is estimated to widen to 30.6% of GSDP in FY22 from 26.4% of GSDP in FY 2020. On the next slide, we have our state-wise trends, and this chart is organized from least deterioration on the left to most deterioration on the right. So on the left, we have West Bengal's leverage as a proportion of GSDP, which is actually expected to improve to 32.2% in FY22 from 33.2% in FY 2020. This is partly on account of very low and stable guarantees and an outperformance of GSDP in FY21 as estimated by the NSO. All the way on the right, we have Andhra Pradesh, and you can see that the leverage level of AP is expected to increase sharply to 40.9% of GSDP in FY22 from 32.1% of GSDP in FY 2020. Now, in the next couple of slides, we're just going to wrap up today's presentation with our forecast for SDL issuance for FY22, spreads and liquidity trends. So in the first half of this fiscal, 26 states and 2 union territories had issued gross SDLs of 3.1 trillion, which is 13% lower than the 3.5 trillion that they raised in H1 of FY21. If the gross state development loan issuance in Q3 of FY22 is in line with the 2 trillion indicated by the RBI for the current quarter, then the total SDL issuance in the first 9 months of FY22 would contract by 8% to 5.1 trillion from 5.6 trillion in the same period of last year. After adjusting for the estimated redemptions, the net SDL is projected at 3.9 trillion in the first 9 months of this year, which is 15% lower than 4.6 trillion in the first 9 months of last year. For Q4, we are projecting the net SDL issuance at 1.7 trillion. This is also 15% lower than the net SDL issuance of 2 trillion in Q4 of FY21. And it benefits from our expectation of a higher than budgeted tax devolution, which we think will get captured at the level of Government of India's revised estimates for FY22 and therefore flow to the state governments in February and March of this fiscal. The gross SDL issuance in Q4 is therefore estimated at 2.5 trillion, minorly higher than last year's issuance. And overall, we are projecting the net SDLs in FY22 at 5.5 trillion. And despite the rise in redemption, we expect the gross SDL issuance to decline by 4.7% to 7.6 trillion in FY22 from 8 trillion in FY21. On the next slide, we're going to just quickly take a look at the spreads. The spreads between the weighted average 10-year SDLs and the 10-year benchmark GSEC averaged 77 basis points during April to August, before easing to 65 basis points in September and a low 62 basis points today in a very small SDL auction. We expect the 10-year spread to rise to around 80 basis points in Q4. On the next slide, we have the usage of the ways and means advances and the overdraft facilities by the states from the RBI. Now, this data is only available up till July of 2021 as of now. And out of the 12 states in our sample, only AP, Haryana, Kerala, and Telangana availed liquidity facilities from the RBI during the first 4 months of this fiscal, which is even through the second wave of COVID-19. And you can see their FY22 usage in green in both of the charts that we have over here. But there is a sharp rise in usage by AP and by Telangana. And overall, it appears that liquidity stress is limited to a few states in the current year. So this brings me to the end of my slides and to our final poll question for today. Please bring up the last poll question on the screen. The question is, where do you project the 10-year SDL yield at end March 2022? Less than 7%, between 7 and 7.5%, or more than 7.5%? Today's auction is around 6.99. But again, it was a very small auction today with a market holiday tomorrow. Okay, I have the poll result. A resounding 62% of you think that the 10-year SDL yield will be between 7 and 7.5% at end March 2022. And the rest of you are equally split between below 7% and more than 7.5%. I think I will fully agree with this poll. We do expect that as we get closer to monetary policy normalization by the MPC, the 10-year GSEC yield will rise, and also the spreads will be higher in Q4. So 7 to 7.5% seems quite appropriate. So now I'm going to introduce our guest, Mr. Srikant Chatterjee. He's the Deputy Head, Debt Capital Markets at ICICI Bank Limited. He has an aggregate experience of over 20 years spanning domestic and international debt markets. At ICICI Bank, his responsibilities include the pan-India coverage of regular bond issuers, institutional investors, and retirement funds. He's been part of several regulatory and industry committees for the development of corporate bond and CDS markets in India. He's agreed to join our webinar today and share his valuable insights into the state government finances and the state development loan market. Thank you so much, Srikant, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Aditi, for inviting me for this ICRA webinar on state finances. We saw the numbers on the supply side. I will try to share my thoughts on the demand side and the investor allocations that we see in terms of allocation to state development loans, which is the market borrowing part of the states. Today, if you see, while SDL investors primarily have a buy and hold strategy, the demand landscape for SDLs is far from homogeneous. So with each investor segment having their own motivations as well as incentives for participating in SDL markets. SDL demand is primarily a function of carry, that's the chasing the yield part, liquidity, and tenor preference. So to explain it further, let me try to break up the ownership pattern of state development loans and how we see each investor segment responding to the increasing supply in SDLs. 85% of the total outstanding SDLs is today held by scheduled commercial banks, insurance companies, as well as PF trusts. If you add cooperative banks and non-bank PDs to that, you have another 5%. So that makes it 90% of the outstanding SDL stock, which is held by these three segments. Now, while this percentage of holding by banks, insurance, and PF trust has remained consistent at around 85% for quite a number of years, within this overall percentage, certain segments have been moving much faster than the other segments. So let's take them one by one. As far as bank treasuries is concerned, there is an evergreen demand for SDLs. However, bank treasuries, the demand is limited to mostly up to the 10-year maturity. The main motivations for banks are basically SLR status, eligibility for LCR, zero risk weight, and obviously the yield chasing part, the carry part. If you move to the insurance segment, there is an interesting dynamics which is happening there. The life insurance companies, as you know, are traditional buyers on the long end SDLs, where ULIP and general insurance portfolios, there we have demand for the short tenor and intermediate tenor SDLs. The demand for long tenor SDLs will always be increasing from the insurance segment, given the increasing demand for annuity products that we are seeing. However, if we analyze the holdings of insurance companies over the last 3 years, their holding in SDLs have actually decreased from 34% in FY18, March 2018, to around 30% in June 2021. One thing you have to remember, even a 1% change variation in SDL holdings translates to a 40,000 crore change in holding, which is a significant number by itself. So if you see what is happening in the insurance segment is that at the same time, the insurance holdings in government securities, the central government securities have increased. This is a function of the increasing supply in long tenor G-Secs from the government of India, and since you see when we spoke about the SDL spreads, we actually spoke about SDL spreads in the 10-year maturity. But if you move to the longer end of the curve, the spread of SDLs over long tenor G-Secs is very minimal. So what is happening that insurance companies, the allocation to long tenor G6 is happening at a much faster pace than the allocation to long tenor SDLs. Although as a product, given the trend towards annuity products, we see more and more demand coming from insurance companies going forward. This brings us to our third segment, which is the PF trusts. Now, PF trusts, we see a trend which is opposite to what we are seeing in case of insurance companies. In PF trusts, actually their holding has moved from almost 19.5% in March 2018 to almost 22% now in June 2021. Now, essentially, what is driving the demand for SDLs as far as PF trust is concerned? It's primarily risk aversion, given the corporate credit events that have happened in 2018 and 2019. Secondly, very low corporate bond supply in H1 2022 so far. And the fact that this AAA PSU corporate bonds are now trading at a yield almost 15 to 20 basis points below the SDL yields. All this makes a strong case for higher allocation by PF trusts to SDLs. So while we are, when we evaluate these large three segments, we are actually seeing that while an insurance company evaluates allocation to SDLs vis-a-vis the prevailing yields on long tenor G6, for PF trusts, it is actually SDL allocation is actually a component of the fungibility between SDLs and corporate bonds. So for PF trusts, the allocation to SDL comes at the cost of corporate bonds, while the case for insurance company is a bit different. Now, while we have spoken about the 90% of the demand part, we also need to take note the balance 10%. And the balance 10%, there are also equally interesting trends that we are seeing there. If you see the others category in terms of the holding of SDLs, which is published by the RBI in its monthly bulletins, there the others category has actually increased from 3% to 5%, 3% in March 2018 to 5% in June 2021. And this is primarily a large contributor in this trend is NPS. And given the increasing AUM of NPS, this is the fastest growing end investor segment in the corporate bond market, in the fixed income markets in India. We see this demand to sustain, and this is where the new demand or the incremental demand can come. And this is one of the segments which we have to take note going forward. The other thing is about corporate category. If you see in the June quarter, that's a Q1 to 2022, we saw corporates adding 40,000 crore of SDLs in their net holding in June over March. Now, this 40%, if you see, is quite a significant number. And this is primarily coming from the fact that a lot of corporates are investing in SDLs directly because of the yield part, and also because of the fact that short tenor SDLs are now yielding better than the bank FD rates. Additionally, we also need to remember that this corporates category also includes the NBFCs. And last year, the NBFCs, the LCR regime has kicked in. The LCR framework, liquidity coverage ratio framework has kicked in, which has led to NBFCs investing more and more into government securities and SDLs. So we need to be mindful of the trend that we are seeing on the corporate side, the NPS side, and also be mindful of the shifting that is happening within the big three holders of the SDLs, that's the banks, insurance, and the PFs. So having said about the demand side, let me talk something about the supply side. Now, supply side, fairly, as we saw the number of 7.6, that translates to a 2.5 lakh crore of supply, gross supply in the last quarter. I think this is fairly manageable given that we have 13 auction Tuesdays in the last quarter, and 2.5 lakh crore almost translates to less than 20,000 crore per week supply, which is fairly manageable. And we see risks to the downside. We see this number being revised downside, given the fact that the WMA limits have now been extended to March 2022. And also, if you look at the T-bill holdings, treasury bill holdings of state governments, which has touched almost more than 90,000 crore as per the last WSS release. We see the supply to be manageable as far as Q4 is concerned, and provided the devolution of the central grants in Q4 happens as per time and schedule. So in short, if you look at the SDL market dynamics, there are different investor segments which have an appetite for certain specific maturity buckets of the SDLs, and this is across the curve. And we believe that if the SDL supply is balanced across different multiple maturity buckets without overburdening a single maturity bucket, we think that the SDL supply should be managed in a non-disruptive manner. The risk for this will always depend that if there is a higher corporate bond supply in Q4, so far the trends show that the corporate bond supply is going to undershoot last year's number by a big margin. But if that supply increases, obviously we may see some switches away from SDLs into corporate bond category. But as we, based on the data and trends that we have as on date, we feel that the SDL supply is manageable for this fiscal year, for the remainder part of the fiscal year.
Thanks, Srikanth, for sharing your remarks. And this brings us to the Q&A portion of today's webinar. And I request all of you to please put in your questions in the Q&A box below. In the meantime, I'm going to kick off with a question of my own for Srikanth. Can you share some thoughts on why foreign investors are shying away from investing in SDLs? Because the proportion of the limit utilization is woefully low as compared to GSEC and corporate bonds. So if you can just share some thoughts on that.
Yeah, so in my demand dynamics, I had mainly focused on the domestic side of the demand, and SDL markets are primarily driven by domestic investors. If you look at the foreign investors, RBI has set a limit of 2% of outstanding SDLs as the total potential limit that foreign investors can invest in SDLs. However, today that translates to almost a foreign investor limit of 85 to 90,000 crore. But today, the outstanding investment by foreign investors stands at barely 1,000 crore. Barely 1,000 crore of investments in SDLs, and this compares against around 1.1 lakh crore of investment in government securities, central government securities. There are a couple of reasons why foreign investors have been traditionally shying away from this segment. One of the reasons is that foreign investors would like to see more and more states getting a credit rating. And in absence of credit rating, what is happening is they are unable to do a proper analysis of these entities, because the way they look at it, there is hardly any meaningful data, financial data that comes between two budgets, and that makes it difficult for them to assess. If you look at the track record of state governments, there is only one state government which has taken an international rating, that is the KIAB, which is the Kerala Infrastructure Investment Funding Board, which did a masala bond almost 2.5 years back, where they took an international rating for the issuing entity, which was the state government undertaking, and that is the only rating that we have in the international domain for the states, which is out in the public domain. The second part is the low liquidity in SDLs, and the SDLs being primarily a buy and hold category product. We see the lack of liquidity as clearly an issue of concern for foreign investors. Thirdly, what happens is that SDLs are typically a new issuance every time. There is, although we have seen some issuers, some states doing reissuance, but that is far and few. Today we have outstanding SDL amount of 41 lakh crore. Against that, we have almost 4,000 ISINs, which makes it hardly 1,000 crore as an average issue size. 1,000 crore is only $150 million US, which falls below the threshold that is required by a lot of foreign investors. And last but not the least, if you analyze the foreign investor holdings in GSECs, primarily it is in the maturity bucket of 2023 to 2027. That's where the bulk of the the foreign holdings in central government securities stand as on date. Unfortunately, in SDLs, there is hardly there's not too much supply in the intermediate tenors in the short end of the thing. That also has a constraint. Having said that, how do I see it forward? I think a little bit of investor education coupled with more transparency in terms of release of high frequency data and some more liquidity in the secondary market probably can bring foreign investors back to the market. And that can give the alpha in terms of the demand dynamics in the SDL markets.
Sure. In fact, I just wanted to add that in my experience, whenever there is a shorter tenor in issuance by a state government, it tends to be a much smaller ticket size. So the 1,000 crore average that you're mentioning, we typically see it for the 10-year market. And in fact, a few brave states that go in for very long-term, very long tenor issuances, we can even see 2,000 to 3,000 crore kind of ticket sizes. But the short-term ticket sizes are very, very small. So the liquidity factor is really missing. I completely agree with you on that.
In fact, just to add on that, reissuance will not work very well in the long end because that's more of a buy and hold investor segment. But in the short end, reissuance can work well for SDLs. But obviously, there is a concern of lumping of maturities. But that can lead to, because in the short end, the players who are present are actually investors who need liquidity and would be happy to see some two-way trades happening in those papers in the short term.
That's a very interesting point. We have a question in the chat box, and I request actually all of you to please put in your questions in the Q&A box. So the question we have is, do you expect SDL spreads to come down, as you mentioned that demand-supply dynamics are balanced? Now, I'll take a go at this one first. We typically expect that the SDL spreads go up in Q4. We see this year after year after year. And one of the reasons for that is that typically Government of India also tends to keep a lower amount of borrowings for Q4 and very often tries to wrap them up by middle or the end of February itself, which is what the expectation is for the current year as well. And, therefore, in the years particularly where the state governments are back-ending their borrowings, which is what we're expecting in the current year, we do tend to see the spreads going up a little bit. Right now, I think they're artificially low at around 62 basis points. They were above 75 for the bulk of H1. And I do expect that 80 to 85 should be a fairly, balanced amount of spread between the 10-year SDL and GSEC, especially in March of 2022. What are your thoughts, Srikanth?
Yeah, so if you look at SDL spreads, when we speak of the 60 to 80, that is the range that we've probably spoken about. That's a 10-year bucket which we are looking at. I feel it is manageable as long as there is not excessive supply in that same maturity bucket. One prerequisite for that is that the SDL supply should be across the tenor, not only focused on the 10-year data point. Secondly, also 10-year SDL spreads are also a function of where we see the 10-year drifting, because 10-year already is drifting towards 640, 635, 640 levels. The SDL 10-year may not drift it as faster or proportionately because it's primarily a buy and hold segment. We also need to understand that if there is an index inclusion going forward, 10-year is an FAR eligible security. So that can bring down, that can have a lot of potential interest from foreign investors in the 10-year maturity bucket. Unfortunately, the index inclusion benefits will not accrue to SDLs. So that can have a widening of spreads on technical reasons. However, I feel that, in fact, when we saw the poll, I think 80% of the people said 7.5 and below, because the below 7% is also in that camp. I think unless there are disruptive events there, it should withhold its levels. Additionally, we also need to keep in mind where does the AAA corporate bond PSU bond yields shift, because actually AAA PSU bonds are actually a close fungible what I say instrument with respect to SDLs. So we need to watch for it, but 60 to 70 basis points, banks may like to have a higher spread, but I think it's manageable unless there is excess supply in a single maturity.
So the next question we have is, why do you think that so many states don't come in for very long-term issuances? We only see a couple of repeat states. I think Telangana and TN are the two that really pop up in my mind, who like to go in for issuances more than 20 years. So any reasons that come to your mind why there are more states who are going in for long-term issuances? Spreads tend to be very, very fine. The yield curve tends to be very flat at the longer end.
So I don't have a first-hand primary information about the states, but yes, you are right in saying that the long end of the curve is actually concentrated only in a handful of states, and probably whenever we get to inquire about long tenor borrowings, essentially it increases debt sustainability, but it also has a view on the borrowers, their view on interest rates, and typically how they see their liability burden shifting over the years. Unlike a financial institution, because most of the large borrowers in the corporate bond market are financial institutions, the PFIs or the financial institutions or the NBFCs or HFCs. Unfortunately, on their asset side, they don't have long tenor lending, and that's what constrains them from issuing long tenor SDLs, long tenor corporate bonds. Unfortunately, in SDLs, the states may not have that type of constraint. So we would like to see states having a well-distributed yield curve rather than positioning themselves to only one end of the yield curve, either the long or the short. That's what I feel. It would be important to see more and more states coming in. But the question is that we did a small analysis of the SDL issuance for the FY current financial year. 23% of the SDL issuances has happened in the ultra long category, which is greater than 10 years, greater than 15 years. So, and this is contributed only by 2-3 states. So imagine if you were to have more and more states coming in, obviously the spread over G6, because the SDL curve is not that steep compared to what you see the steepness in a G6 curve. So probably it might mirror, and that might bring back a lot of insurance allocation, which is now going to long tenor G6 back to this long tenor. It would be an interesting dynamics to watch.
We have a follow-up question on the chat box when we're talking about where the spreads are going to be at the end of March. The question is, where do we see the repo rate? What are the MPC timelines that we are expecting, and how we're building that into our expectation of rates and spreads for the SDL market in Q4 and beyond? So would you like to take that first?
Okay, so basically, if you look at between now and April, we have 2 policy meetings. One in December, which will be following back to back after the FOMC tapering decision, which we expect in November, and after that the policy is immediately following the budget. Now, while we believe that directionally the rates are moving upwards, we are obviously in the market. We are not sure about the pace and the quantum of that increase, but we are firmly of the belief that this movement upwards will not be disruptive. So if you want me to chart the direction of the MPC actions or the RBI actions, whether MPC or non-MPC, it will be probably moving up the reverse repo rate, followed by the change in stance, followed by the rate hike. So
you just sorry, let me just interrupt. You think that the reverse repo rate hike will come before the change in stance, not together?
Sequentially, I'm saying.
Okay.
Reverse repo rate hike, then the stance change from accommodative to neutral, and then the action on the repo rate. If we assume this sequence, and if the fundamental assumption is the changes will not be disruptive, we see that the ultimate repo rate hike might be a bit further away, although expectations in the market might keep building. We need to watch out where the crude is headed, where the 10-year treasury is headed. Currently, as we speak today, these are not in very comfortable territory for fixed income investors. So I think we have to watch out but whatever happens, the change will not be disruptive. That's the communication that we have been hearing from the central bank, and that continues to be our base case going forward.
We have a slightly different view at ICRA. Our view now is that we're likely to get the change in stance from accommodative to neutral, and only then the RBI is going to hike the reverse repo rate. So we believe now these two will happen simultaneously rather than the reverse repo rate being put in place in the December policy. Now we think that both are going to come together in February. So as the MPC votes to change the stance, the RBI will take that as a cue and do a baby step increase in the reverse repo rate so that we get a narrower corridor. And then, of course, only with the repo rate hikes, we expect the reverse repo rate hikes to happen after that. So our current expectation is February for the change in stance and the narrowing of the corridor, and then two rate hikes in April and in June. So we expect a modest move upward as far as the yields are concerned. I think a lot of the adjustment has already happened, especially to the taper expectation and to the sharp jump in crude oil prices, which may or may not sustain at these levels once the peak of the winter is over. So there could be some sort of fall back in terms of the crude oil prices, which would help to ease spreads out a little bit, and ease the yields themselves toward the end of Q4. And at the same time, we'll start getting closer to the eventual liftoff by the MPC. And therefore, we need to kind of, balance out these two factors. The other thing is that, we are right now expecting a 2 trillion increase in the tax revenues for Government of India as compared to the budgeted level. So that is fairly significant. And the other really major important part of, the fiscal math, which will become clear only in Q4, is going to be how much of the disinvestment target is missed. So we got a huge target of 1.75 trillion. And potentially there could be a miss as large as even 1 trillion in this target. And therefore, we are, that is going to determine whether the fiscal deficit for Government of India is going to be lower than budgeted and by how much. So that could also actually counteract some of the increase in the repo rate, the expectations around that in Q4. Now I have another question on the Q&A box. The question is, do you feel that the US Treasury is likely to hit 2% in 6 months? And what will be the impact of that on our 10-year GSEC? Srikanth, I'll ask you to go first.
So sitting in India, it is very difficult to take a very concrete view of US Treasury, but the movement from 1.225 to 1.60 has really has really ruffled some quarters. But having said that, it's a fairly liquid market. 6 months is too long a window because gradually we see a shift happening in the transitory versus permanent nature of inflation. The employment dynamics also needs to be worked out. Having said that, it is very clear that the US Fed is clearly convinced that yes, the tapering has to commence sooner than later. 6 months is too long a time. Can't say. I think there might be a 50% chance. But yes, the movement from 1.2 to 1.6 has already been disruptive in a very, very short period. A large part of this view is also dependent upon what happens in crude going forward. We are already left with hardly 1.5 months of the US Treasury, US markets operating, because in the second fortnight of December, the markets anyway go into a very low liquidity scenario. I think after December 15th, people will watch out for the new year to come in. I think it's a 50-50 scenario, but currently my view is it will probably remain below 2% for the near future. But there are many variables which we need to keep track.
I think I'll tend to agree because, if you look at a 6-month horizon, at max, we're going to look at the tapering starting and maybe one rate hike by the US Fed in the middle of next calendar year or later. And with that, I think 2% still seems to be a little far away because I do believe that crude oil will not sustain at these levels beyond the peak of the winter. Because that's going to be enough time for the shale supplies to start ramping up and really helping to cool down prices by at least $5 per barrel. At the very minimum, that is what I would expect. So I do agree that with you, Srikanth, that 2% in the next 6 months is unlikely unless we get convinced that CPI inflation in the US is no longer transitory. So that would have to be a big, sort of shift in dynamics over there to be able to account for that. We are past our scheduled time, so I'll ask our audience, if you have any further questions, please do send them in quickly in the chat box. Okay, we have one question on the movement of fuels from VAT to GST. What is the likelihood of that happening in the near term? So my personal view is that this is unlikely to happen because the states have very limited flexibility as far as their tax revenues are concerned now, and the fuels is really the one area that they still can control in terms of being able to raise tax revenues if they're really in a pinch, along with the excise revenues that they raise from alcohol. So in my view, it's going to take a huge amount of concessions of some other sort to get fuels included in GST. The states will try to delay it as long as possible. And when we're already on the cusp of GST compensation ceasing in just a matter of 3 quarters, this is something that the states are unlikely to agree to in a hurry. That's my view. Srikanth, would you like to share your view as well?
No, I feel we are already in a disruptive period in terms of the state revenues, and as you mentioned rightly, SOPR and other trends are not looking great. And you have to remember that when this change, if at all it happens, it has to apply to all states, irrespective of their fiscal weakness or fiscal strength, because SDL spreads do not reflect that relative financial strength and weakness of the states. I don't see that happening anytime soon because it's a very difficult. It has a lot of it upsets the entire revenue math, and it has far-changing implications. It will require a lot more consensus, and it will probably require some degree of stable revenue environment before we see that actually happening. So may not be immediate future, probably sometime later.
I would agree. I think this is something that is at least a few years away in terms of the states feeling settled enough in the post-COVID period in terms of their revenues to be able to go in for such a major disruption yet again. Nitika, would you like to add any final comments from your side?
No, I think Aditi, it's been very well covered. Most of the risk and on the revenues and expenditure side, I think we have highlighted. I think on the spreads and the SDL sides, thank you, Srikanth, for your views. I mean, it was really enlightening to understand the the SDL market in depth from the point of view of the supply side as well as demand side. So those were really useful comments. So thank you so much for your time, Srikanth.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to second Nitika's thanks. Really, thank you so much for joining our webinar and sharing your views on the supply as well as the demand side. And thanks, Nitika, to you as well and to our audience for participating in our polls and in the Q&A session and for joining in today's event. Thank you so much and good day, everybody. Stay safe.
Thank you.